It's worth noting. How do we fix it though? You're either going to have to get justices on the Supreme Court, judges on the courts of appeals, judges in the district courts, judges on the state Supreme Courts who have more respect for our constitutional rights, or you're going to have to get legislation passed in your state and federal courts that is going to strengthen our individual civil rights.
Just like
right?
That should be out. You might think that a person sentence refusing the police and the high school. If the police says stop, you have an obligation as a citizen to stop.
I agree. I'm not going to get into a high-speed chase. But there are people who, I mean, I can see an example where you're justified in running from the police. For example, this guy who down in Montgomery County ran from the police, that chase started in Radford. He lived in Radford. All the police knew him in Radford. He knew if the Radford police stopped him, it wouldn't be good for him. And not just because he was driving suspended. He had bad experiences with the Radford City Police. Do I want to stop and risk being beat up by the police? Do I run and try to get away? So I'm not saying you don't stop. And if the police, I mean, if I get the blue lights behind me, I'm going to stop. I'd probably stop too quickly.
Generally you stop, but I don't think we want to get to where because the law says stop, you stop. I got pulled over in the middle of nowhere at 4 o'clock in the morning in rural North Carolina, and I thought about not stopping.
I believe you have to stop there, but I think we could try to speed limit to the next place where nobody's going to say something.
No, that cop got very angry with me for not stopping within a minute. He was like acting like he was going to arrest me for not stopping within like 60 seconds.
What I'm saying is, you take the cases and throw them out of proportion. You know?
Because the underlying issue in the case isn't the people.
Sorry, I know, we all know that the police is totally out of hand.
The police what?
It's totally out of hand.
Police are totally out of hand. Some of them.
Most of them, a lot of them, they're totally out of hand. And the reason for this is because cases like you say, you know, where somebody is charged
Right.
and let a king, and they beat up the shit out of the king.
Right. Rodney King.
Rodney King. How do you deserve it? How do you deserve it?
I don't think I can say anybody deserves to be beaten.
In that case, I think he deserves it.
And apparently the jury agreed with you. At least the criminal jury did. The civil jury didn't.
You see, the problem is the lack of laws, the lack of law enforcement. You know, this kind of a law says specifically that if you read the police on high school traits, I say high school traits, you know, they're going to get injured. I know there's that.
As someone who does criminal defense work, I will tell you that laws have very little deterrent effect on human behavior. Doctor?
Actually, that gentleman.
Oh, was he first? Okay.
Yeah, he was before me. Going back to the first case you mentioned with the person in prison or jail,
Right.
is that defended by a local Commonwealth attorney or is that defended by the state? Who was the defense in that case?
The way it works is when you sue a state agency or an employee of a state agency like the Department of Corrections, or if you sue a county official, municipal official, set aside actually cities. Cities are a little separate. County officials, constitutional officials of counties maintain essentially insurance through the Commonwealth of Virginia through the Division of Risk Management. And the Attorney General's office is responsible for providing a defense to those officials when they're sued. The way they normally do that is they hire outside private lawyers to defend them on those cases. The correctional officer in Botetourt County had a local attorney to defend him in that case that was paid by your tax money.
That's by statute.
Yes. Yes. That case was actually litigated because initially the Attorney General's office declined representation, and they actually filed a declaratory judgment action in state court and forced the state to represent him. The argument that the state had was that since these were alleged as intentional acts, that there's no coverage for intentional acts. the officer would be covered for negligent acts, but not intentional acts. That didn't fly, and the state ended up paying his legal bills. Well, it's kind of creates a curious quandary because most officers, law enforcement, they're going to have some form of immunity. Refer to sovereign immunity, qualified immunity. Generally, for acts of negligence, there's no liability. But they're obviously liable for intentional acts. Will probably be liable for in a grossly negligent situation or reckless or willful wanton situations where the degree of negligence is higher. But it's kind of curious that the state says, well, I'll represent you on cases where you're probably immune, but I'm going to refuse to represent you on the cases where there's probably liability. And had we won that case, there would have been a question whether the state would have paid a judgment on it. Since it was intentional acts, the state may have refused to pay and said your only remedy is to go against the correctional officer himself or herself, and he has no money. He has no money to satisfy judgment. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for a very interesting talk.
Thank you.
Tremendously. One thing that bothers me greatly is the extent to which people who are using cell phone cameras, headquarters, in many cases now are being charged, in some cases with obstruction of justice. Could you give us, first of all, sort of a brief overview of, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, what if I just decide, for example, if the police officer comes up and stops me, I have a digital recorder that I turn on. I don't inform the officer that I'm recording the conversation. What happens if I turn on a video camera? What's the state of the law in the Commonwealth?
I would tell you what the state of the common law, what the state of the law is in the Commonwealth, and it most likely would fall under the obstructing justice statute. The other laws that potentially come into play is in some states they have laws against recording people, even in public, without their consent. Now, historically, that's only been a real issue under telephone lines. For example, in Virginia, we have what's called a one-party consent state. I can record a telephone conversation with you without you knowing it. As long as one party to the conversation is okay with the recording, I can record it. Many other states, that's not the case. It's a two-party consent, that all parties to the conversation have to agree to it. That same argument has been used to say that I can't record you in a public place without your consent. I don't believe that will be the case in Virginia. I know of no precedence for that in Virginia. I think you're okay if you want to record people, audio or video. And I think even that goes into a private setting. I don't know if there's any, if you're lawfully in the place, I know of no law that you're violating by recording that.
Yeah, how does that associate with taping, even if the officer knows it? I've heard of some states, I think Missouri is among them, where if you're taping an officer, it falls under wiretap laws.
Yeah, some people have tried to use that. It falls under the same, it's the same kind of argument that a third party to a conversation that goes over the wires, you can't tap and record that conversation without a warrant, or without some sort of judicial authorization that allows you to do so. And they have tried to use that argument. I know of no cases in Virginia where that's been successfully done. And I think that's because, well, Virginia just hasn't gone that far yet toward the nanny state, if you will, or protecting people from themselves. That takes care of the recording aspect. Just the more generic obstruction of justice standard. The law in Virginia is that to obstruct justice, you have to take some act. It has to be more than just making the officer's job more difficult. It has to be some sort of active resistance. And the classic examples that the case law has given us. In one case, an officer was trying to arrest someone, and the guy just cut and ran. The officer had not put his hands on him, hadn't restrained his liberty physically yet. It was kind of, you're under, and the kid takes off. And I say kid because it was an older teenager guy that took off running. Charged him with obstructing justice. Because the police chased him down and caught him. They said, well, you made my job more difficult. You actively resisted my efforts to arrest you by running away. The court said, no, that is not obstructing justice. That was not sufficient resistance in running away. The flip side is, here's the flip case. The guy is spread eagle on the car. The officer's patting him down. Gets ready to grab the right arm to pull it around and arrest him. And the guy pulls his arm away and tries to run away. And the officer immediately just tackled him to the ground and arrested him. That was obstruction of justice. They said because he already asserted his authority over you and was grabbing hold of your arm, you wrenched your arm free and tried to run away. That's sufficient obstruction of justice, whereas merely running away was not. So to then put that in light of recording an officer, I see nothing about a video or audio recording that makes an officer's job more difficult, and it's not any kind of force or active resistance to the officer doing his job. You're merely recording how he does his job. Now, in reality, officer's not going to be thrilled about you recording what he's doing. But I would tell you that because of this case with the taxi cab driver, I'm much more aware that, you know what, I've got my little cell phone here that's got a recording device on it. And if I get pulled over, I'm probably going to reach for it pretty quick and turn on at least the audio recording. I'm not sure how I can work the video while I'm trying to show the officer my license registration, but I'm at least going to record the audio. And thankfully we have very small devices. They're actually pretty sensitive nowadays. But I know of no case right now where someone has been successfully prosecuted for obstructing justice for recording an officer in that way. Now, if you go so far as, you say the police are arresting a third party, and you're trying to record it, and you get up and in some way hinder the officers from doing their job, then you're probably on pretty shaky ground. The closest case to that is, this was in North Carolina a couple years ago. A guy is at his home sleeping at night, and he is awakened by some kind of commotion outside. Looks out his bedroom window, he sees a police officer at his neighbor's house, and the police officer talking to the son of the neighbor who lives next door. Well, the guy happens to be a lawyer. He goes down, walks outside, and hollers to the young man. I forget what his name is, Mike, Josh, whatever. Hey, what's going on? You think you need a lawyer? And the boy says, yeah, I think I'm going to be needing a lawyer. Would you like me to be your lawyer? Yes, I would. The officer at this point turns to me and says, sir, you go back in your house. Leave. Go back in your house. Officer, I'm not trying to keep you from doing your job, but if you would, before you arrest this young man, may I have a few minutes to talk to him? Sir, go back in your house. So he kind of backs up. He didn't go back inside, but he backs up. A few minutes later, another officer shows up. The attorney walks down to this officer, says, hey, I live here next door. The kid said he wants a lawyer. Anything that he's saying now to this officer probably is not going to be admissible in court because he said he wants a lawyer. You can't talk to him. The whole Miranda thing. It's kind of important to some people still. And the officer says, well, it's not my case. I'm just here to provide backup. It's totally this guy's thing. At that point, the officer who's dealing with the young boy comes down and says, sir, you're interfering with my investigation. If you don't watch out, I'm going to arrest you for obstruction of justice. Hey, I'm not trying to get in the way of your investigation. Just give me a minute to talk to the kid before you take him to jail. Sir, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice. And arrests him. Takes him to jail. Thankfully, he got a pretty nice verdict out of that. He won that case. Now, why? See, I think that's an officer just abusing his authority, thinking that he's all that. Nobody's going to get in my way. I don't want any lip from anybody, no crap. And if you get in my way, I'm going to arrest you for something. And I think that too, with the taxi cab driver, I think that's a lot of what that was too. He had hung the phone up on him. He said, if you arrest me, I'm going to sue you. And the officer said, well, we'll see about that. And he exercised his authority. He abused his badge.